learned early that trust is a currency and betrayal cashes out fast. And I, Helena Montez, 35 years old, in the glass and steel heart of New York City, spend that currency with care, never with emotion. Though I have learned to pretend the emotion is only a shadow that I use to measure a person's true weight. I am a senior bank executive, a role that sounds like a crown but feels more like a blade, sharp and always ready to cut the right deal from the wrong instinct. My hidden ambition sits behind the polished desk and the neat suit sleeves, quiet and patient. A plan to redraw the grid of power here, to be the one who can bend an institution without bending the law, to turn whispers into decisions and decisions into outcomes that rewrite a career story from the second or third page of the file into the headline. The personal relationship that frames this episode is intimate, and intimate is dangerous in a room full of people trained to read intent as fast as a trader reads a ticker. Years ago, I believed I had met loyalty in a single heartbeat, a man who promised to stand by me, and a woman who was supposed to be my confidant, the kind of friend who would never let the sun set on a secret. But the sun did set, and what rose was something cold and precise. The man I trusted with my mornings and the friend I trusted with my late nights turned secrets into weapons. And when I found them in a quiet corner of the life we were supposed to be building together, the ache was not in the heart, but in the ledger where every memory turned into a line item I could not erase. I stood at the edge of the trading floor that morning as the city woke in a gray hush, the air smelling faintly of coffee and old money. And I felt that old ache sharpen into intention. I was not just walking through a bank I helped build. I was walking into a test rink, a field trial for the next stage of my ascent. My hidden ambition did not shout in a boardroom. It whispered in the way a pencil balance sheet can shift a fortune by a whisper of interpretation. I had learned to read people in the same breath I learned to read numbers, to sense when someone's truth was a disguise for fear or hunger, to know when someone's smile hid a plan that would either lift you or drop you from your perch. The personal frame for this episode came into focus on a night I thought I would never forget, and then wished I could. A night when two people I believed I knew better than my own shadow crossed a line that must never be crossed in a life I was determined to keep clean. I had thought I had the kind of love that makes a life feel inevitable, that kind that makes you imagine a future that looks perfect on screens and in social feeds. But the truth I learned was that love in the private rooms of power is often a masquerade party where every mask belongs to someone else, and every kiss is a risk you pretend you do not see. The choice I made flowed from that realization, a choice my present self would tell my younger self to run from. Yet my older self knows was necessary, because the only way to protect what you have built is to control the avenues through which it can be undone. The topic I landed on, the one I chose from the list that keeps circling the room like a cold draft, is this: he cheated with my best friend, and now he works for me. It is a sentence that can make a person stumble at the door, but it is the kind of sentence a woman like me learns to use as a key to unlock a locked room, to turn a breach into a boundary, to convert a hurt into a strategy that keeps others honest even when they do not want the honesty. I had watched him step back into the orbit of the bank with the same smile that had once promised devotion, now wearing the armor of regret he did not deserve to wear, a professional demeanor that meant little to the heart that had learned the hardest truths about deceit. She, my best friend, the person I believed would always shield my back, chose a different path, as if our years of shared secrets were only fuel for a private game she played with him. The betrayal came to me not as a scream in a hallway, but as a quiet, calculated move that threatened my authority, the one thing I valued above most else. I did not explode, because explosions are rarely the engines of lasting power. I studied him as he walked into the glass conference room, the light catching the edge of the table and turning it into a blade. He stood there with that practiced, open-mouthed smile that used to melt away my doubt and replace it with warmth. Now it struck me as a sign that he believed power could be borrowed like a suit, that it could be rented for a season, and then paid back at the end of the term with interest. I invited him to speak in front of the risk committee, knowing full well that the moment would reveal his true alignment, not to me, but to the people who would eventually decide his fate. I laid out a challenge that seemed innocuous enough on the surface, a cross-department deployment of a new risk framework, a project that required a man with his set of past loyalties to test his present loyalties. He did as he always did, spoke with a calm tone that made the board lean in, and in that moment I realized that the real test was not about the risk framework at all. It was about whether I could turn a betrayal into a governance tool, whether I could convert a personal wound into a clear professional line that would force the truth into daylight. The plan I hatched was patient and cold. He faltered at first, trying to present the betrayal as a necessary risk in a world that rewarded bold moves, then angled toward a softer, more familiar language of remorse that could have rehabilitated him if the room had allowed it. But I had learned a long time ago that remorse in the wrong room becomes a bargaining chip for the wrong goals, and the board, hungry for clarity, was not about to confuse forgiveness with forgiveness, not when the ledger demanded precision and the culture demanded accountability. My best friend remained a theme in the back of my thoughts, a reminder of the personal cost that sometimes comes with a strategic victory. She, too, had a part in the narrative, a choice to stand beside me or alongside the tide that threatened to pull us both under. The truth was that I did not hate her, not in the way that would ruin the night and break the city's rhythm. I simply saw her as another actor in a script that would not let either of us escape unscathed. Another reminder that loyalty in this world is a shifting compass that points to whoever pays the most in the currency of fear, greed, and necessity. Weeks moved in measured steps, the kind of steps that make a policy manual feel like a map to the stars. I watched him navigate his responsibilities with the same careful precision he had used to cross boundaries, and I let him believe that his survival depended on keeping pace with my demands. Each day, I watched him stand before the risk committee with a face that tried to memorize honesty. And each day the room grew more certain of one thing. I would not let the past pull me under again, even if the past smiled at me with the familiarity of an old lover. The irony of it did not escape me. The very betrayal that had once aimed to destroy me now stood as a tool I could wield, a lever I could pull to lift myself higher while simultaneously curbing the power of those who had once thought themselves beyond consequence. In this way, I turned his misdeed into a masterclass in governance, a demonstration that leadership is not just about who you can persuade with charm or money, but about who you can compel to face the consequences of their own choices. The climax did not come with noise, but with the quiet of a final signature, the kind of signature that seals a chapter and starts the quiet burn of a new dawn. The board approved the revised governance framework, a structure that would monitor risk with a lighter touch on some days and a sharper blade on others, a balance that made the bank safer and my position more secure. It was not a victory that shouted from the rooftops. It was a victory that lowered the drawbridge and locked the gates behind the ex-lover, not out of cruelty, but out of necessity. Because a man who has betrayed the trust of the one person who could keep him in check is not a partner in progress, but a reminder that the wrong kind of loyalty can ruin everything. He walked away with a posture that suggested resignation and a face that hinted at unfinished business. And I watched him go with a calm that had been earned through years of keeping faith with the people who deserved it most, the ones who stood with me when the numbers looked bleak, the ones who believed in a future that could be built on a clean, transparent foundation, rather than on the bones of a party and a pact that should never have existed in the first place. I did not celebrate in a loud way, because celebrations in this life are rarely loud and never permanent. I celebrated by making a note to myself to sleep with the weight of what I had achieved resting on my chest like a quiet, heavy promise that I would never let fear drive my decisions again. As the night settled over the city and the river turned a pale, tired silver, I sat in my corner office and gazed out at the skyline. The lights riding the curves of